That it is a European country, and then she specified that there is a process. And the process, I think you know very well, when it comes to the accession negotiations that take place in order to fulfill the conditions for accession. But she has also specified that we are deepening our relations with, and have been deepening for a long time, our relations with Ukraine, in particular through the association agreement and the linked DCFTA that this includes. And, for example, she mentioned energy and the fact that we are working to integrate their energy, and in particular their electricity grid, with that of the EU. Right. I think all your questions must be relating to events at the moment. Stéphane, follow-up?
Yes, just two short follow-ups. On the first one, I'm having in mind that Switzerland is an important financial place in the middle of Europe. This reluctance from the Swiss government to follow the EU sanctions, does this in a way influence the relationship with Switzerland? And secondly, if I understand right, President Zelensky said he wants some kind of a fast-track procedure toward membership. What does this, what your view? Thank you.
On your first question, quite frankly, our attention at the moment is focused on our relationship with Ukraine and everything that both we, the European Union, and our international partners can do to support Ukraine. And we can only wish and hope that Switzerland will join this effort because, as you say, it is indeed an important actor, in particular when it comes to financial services, which are specifically targeted by many of the measures that we have announced these past days. And as I said, I sincerely hope that we sincerely hope that Switzerland will live up to the moment that we are all living through. On your second question, again, coming back to the issue of membership and special procedures, well, this is not really a question for us. You know the role of the Commission when it comes to negotiation processes. We actually carry out the negotiations on behalf of the EU, but the negotiation process per se is not something that we, the European Commission, sets. So I'm not in a position to comment on this. Yes, Matthijs.
Yeah, I do have a follow-up on what the President von der Leyen said in the interview. I don't think she just explained the process. I think she clearly said, we want Ukraine to become a member of the European Union. And I was wondering, who are the we she was talking about? Is that her personal view? Is that the Commission? Is that the whole European Union? Because I can imagine that some member states have different thoughts on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The President expressed a view which I think is extremely general, extremely well shared. Sorry, that's not the right word. That is that Ukraine is one of us, as she expressed it. It is a European country, and we want them in, meaning Europe in general. And if you look at what we are seeing across Europe at the moment in terms of demonstrations of support for the country, it is clear that people believe that Ukraine is at the heart of Europe. But she then also specified that there is a process. And I think that this is the important point. This is what I can say. Matthijs.
Yes, sorry to come back to this. I want to have it absolutely clear. She said, I think we want them to become a member. I hear you saying now something different, explaining it a bit different. I understand that she also wants to show the solidarity with Ukraine. I really understand that maybe she went too far with this specific phrase. Are you backtracking a little bit on this? We want them to become a member, sorry.
No. She spoke as President of the European Commission. She expressed a view as President of the European Commission. And that is abundantly clear. But she also clearly basically said there is a process for this to happen. You know, it is not the President of the European Commission on her own who decides when Ukraine becomes a candidate and what is the process to be followed for it to become a candidate. But she expressed her view very clearly on the ultimate outcome that she would like to see. So I think that that is abundantly clear. Griselda. Griselda, tu as un problème avec ta source micro. Ok, nous n'arrivons pas à te connecter et donc je passe la parole à Wallace.
Hello, thank you. Nicholas Wallace for...
Nicholas, pardon.
I have two questions, both on Russian propaganda. The first is Thierry Breton's call yesterday with Google and YouTube. You know, he said that he hoped to see them take tough measures. I wanted to ask whether he was able to actually agree any specific measures with Google and YouTube yesterday. My second question relates to the letter which you may have seen that's been sent by the Prime Ministers of Poland, Latvia, Lithuania and Estonia, which has 7 quite specific recommendations to Google, YouTube, Facebook and Twitter on basically taking down Russian propaganda accounts, Russian state-run media accounts. Have you seen this letter? And if so, does this reflect the position of the European Commission? Does it have the backing of the European Commission? Thank you.
Johannes.
Thank you, Eric. Yes, on the call that took place yesterday between Vice President Vera Jourova, Commissioner Thierry Breton, and the CEOs of YouTube, Susan Wojcicki and Google, Sundar Pichai, the four discussed the urgent need for taking stronger actions to counter Russian state-sponsored disinformation and to comply with sanctions, including the latest measures. And there was agreement to keep adapting and updating the platform's policies in light of the current situation. I'm also happy to share direct quotes with you, maybe in writing. There's no, let's say, a specific, basically, or a specific result in terms of what they will exactly do. It's important to note that there is already a lot going on from the side of the platforms. You know that we have a framework more generally, the Commission with the platforms, which is the Code of Practice, and where these things are also discussed, and there's also work ongoing, as you know, on a let's say a bolstered new Code of Practice. But on this specific meeting, they agreed to remain in touch on the issue. And I think it was important for the VP and for the Commissioner to have this personal call to, to establish also this direct link at the highest level and discuss these issues. As part of the letter, yes, we are aware of the letter, and this, I think, its reply in a way is already what I already gave to you. So the issue of disinformation is a very important one, and Eric has already mentioned or responded to a question on this Sputnik Russia Today announcement that the President made yesterday. So all this you need to see in a context. Thank you.
Thank you. We continue generally on the situation with Ukraine, not segmenting by sub-subject, or else it would be very complicated. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Just to follow up to the Sputnik question, could you maybe just elaborate a little bit about, is it a technical issue that you're trying to work out or a legal issue or both?
Thank you. No, we're looking for the best legal way to ensure that we can reach our objective. There may also be technical considerations at play. To be honest, I'm not fully aware of all the details, but definitely we are looking at the best way to ensure that we come to an effective decision in this respect. Okay, I will go back to the Interaxo platform. Woyuya.
Hi, yeah, thank you. I have two questions follow-up. The first one regarding the Russian media. First, the rationale basically. Are you worried if you actually carried forward that EU media, for example, will be retaliated? You will trigger tit-for-tat media war that is, put all the journalists here maybe from EU in danger. Second, I don't know how can you argue, EU advocate this freedom of press, and now you, basically you say, you don't like it, I know, the Russian media. But the same thing in EU, the left and the right media, they don't like each other. In the US, Fox News and CNN accuse each other of disinformation. So the fact that RT has existed in EU member states for many, many years, so shows that you or your member states have accepted that, it's okay. So why, you do it now? It's not violating your freedom of speech of press? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your questions. When it comes to retaliating against EU media in Russia, quite frankly, when you see the state of play of media freedom in Russia and the actual information that Russian citizens have access to, the Russians are a long, long, long way ahead. So from that point of view, there's absolutely no context. Basically, it is extremely difficult, if not impossible, for Russian citizens to have access to any type of free and objective media, and in particular, European or international media in general. So that's one thing. The second point about Sputnik and Russia today. What has changed? Well, I think you see the images of what has changed every day on television. The fact is that we consider that these two media are a part of the Russian war effort in Ukraine, and that they are promoting views on this conflict which are entirely controlled by the Russian apparatus, by the Russian state, and that therefore they in no way represent any sort of media that try to provide balanced coverage. I'm sure that is something that you understand. But they are basically propagating the views of the Kremlin. And therefore, in that context, we are taking measures not against a media, we are taking measures against a propaganda channel or propaganda channels. That is the difference. But of course, we value the freedom of media very much, and that is why these are steps that are not taken lightly and that are taken only in very exceptional circumstances, such as a war of aggression against a sovereign country. Let me continue. David.
Hi, is this working?
It is. It is.
Okay. Von der Leyen last week, I think, was it on Friday or whatever, mentioned the importance of stopping the export of technology, certain technologies to Russia. She zoomed in on the refinery, Russian refineries, and mentioned the 24 billion amount of trade of Russian refineries, refined products coming into the EU, and said there were harsh sanctions. Now, the sanctions were published late on Friday, on the 25th. We've gone through the sanctions. They will have very little effect in this specific area. They don't seem to ban catalysts. They ban major pieces of equipment, which will take 10, 15 years to work through in having an effect on the Russian refinery industry. I was wondering, are catalysts actually banned, or is there some error in reading the regulation?
To straight, David, you're asking me specifically whether catalysts are on the list of sanctions. Miriam, oh no, sorry, Tim, I'm not sure you have the list with you. We will need to come back to you on that very specific product, which I'm sure is very important. But let you remind you of the broader picture and of the comments that we made at the time. Now, these sanctions were proposed and approved on the basis of a completely different situation. At the time, President Putin had just announced that he was recognizing the independence of the Luhansk and Donetsk oblasts, which are part of Ukraine. And at the time when we adopted these sanctions, we were very clear, the President was very clear that the objective was to erode the capacity of Russia's energy sector over time. Why? Because it is clear that in the European Union, the regulations continue to evolve. The environmental conditions which are set on industrial products when it comes to energy use or on cars or whatever continue to evolve, and therefore the Russian energy industry needs to be able to offer us products which meet these criteria. And our belief is that over time, by depriving the Russian energy sector of access to the technologies that we have mentioned in the sanctions list, they will no longer be progressively in a position to meet the stringent criteria of the energy market prevailing in Europe. This is not from one day to the next. That is absolutely true, and we have never pretended otherwise. Now, of course, sanctions are adopted at one specific point in time. Since then, as you have seen, the situation on the ground has evolved dramatically, and so have our sanctions. Augustine.
Thank you.
I heard you and I no longer hear you. Go ahead. Go ahead, Agustin.
Do you hear me, Eric?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, okay. I have a question on, two questions on enlargement, basically. The procedures are there, but we remember from the big enlargement in 2004 that the procedures and decisions can be adopted to the political will. At that time, there was a political will in Europe to unite the Europe, so they didn't look too much into the conditionality. Many former members of the Commission admitted that they knew that several countries were not fully ready, but it was a political decision to take that in. Now it's a new time, historic time for Europe. Can EU decide politically to have enlargement as a peace project, not just as a technical box-ticking exercise that it's now on? Just to remind you that former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, which is now North Macedonia, applied 12 years ago to join, 10 years ago to join EU, and it hasn't started even the accession talks. And it is already a member of NATO, same with Albania. So promising Ukraine at this time, because we know that they are fighting for entire Europe, can in the long term seem to be a little bit misleading. Or are there negotiations going on within the EU at the highest level to do some differences in the enlargement process? And second question, again, it's on Serbia. Many times we saw that the decision...
Augustine, could we please take one question at a time, because they're already very long, and I believe you have to bear with us when it comes also to our capacity to answer appropriately. So we'll take this question first, and then I'll give you the floor again on Serbia. On your question related to a promise on the process, now what the President has clearly lined out is a perspective, which is one which I think we all agree applies, even according to the treaties, to countries that are in Europe and that live up to the values of Article 2 and promote them. Then, when it comes to the process, she has reminded us through this interview that she gave, that there is indeed a process for this negotiation. And she has not said anything about deviating from the process. Now, we know that there are calls. We have heard the message from President Zelensky calling for an accelerated, fast-tracked procedure. But again, as I say, let me remind you that the Commission works on the basis of a mandate that it receives to negotiate. We do not define the mandate ourselves. And in that sense, I fully understand your questions. And again, we stand in solidarity with Ukraine, but the process is not something that the Commission itself defines. It works based on the process that exists. Now, all that being said, I also hear you when you speak of the enlargement process that is ongoing with the current candidate countries. And I believe you have heard the President repeat an extremely high number of times how much she values and supports the enlargement process vis-à-vis these candidate countries in the Western Balkans. And if there is one person who has been doing everything in her power to try to ensure that these negotiations can proceed as quickly as possible, it is the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen. Right. Now I come back to your question on Serbia.
Yes, thank you. In several conclusions, even at the summits of EU, it was stated that membership in EU should be a strategic choice of the candidate country, and they should behave based on this. Serbia publicly said that they are not going to support EU sanctions on Russia. So saying that we expect candidate countries to align worked until now on different issues, while Serbia doesn't have a good track record on that, but that's not the point, because this is something completely different. So do you concretely expect Serbia to align with EU sanctions against Russia? And if not, what will be the consequences? Because we hear even the proposal to suspend accession negotiations. Thank you.
Thank you. I think it applies, what I said earlier, applies to all our friends, neighbors, and partner countries. We believe that we are in a historic moment, that action needs to take place now, and we invite all our friends, neighbors, and partners to apply sanctions in a coordinated and comprehensive manner. Now, there is an enlargement process which takes place. It's a process. It's not a one-off. It's not one decision by this or that country that actually defines what is the end result of this enlargement or of this negotiation process. But it is clearly stated, I believe, and I turn to my colleagues for confirmation, that we expect candidate countries to align with our external policy positions, be they statements or be they measures which are adopted by the European Union. This is a process over time. It's not 100% immediately, but there must be forward positive movement in terms of increasing the degree of alignment. And this is all that we can say today on this subject. Let me continue. Daniel.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
All right. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me? No.
We can hear you. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Thanks. Can you tell me, following the Home Affairs Ministry Council yesterday, what is the status of extending the stay for Ukrainians beyond 90 days? I mean, there have been these comments about 3 years. Where does that stand, please? Thanks.
Thank you. This is a question for Anita.
Thank you. I think you're referring to the Temporary Protection Directive since 2001. Indeed, we confirmed that discussions have taken place yesterday at the Extraordinary Justice and Home Affairs Council. And the Commissioner Johansson has already said that work is on the way to prepare the triggering of the directive as an option of support.
Thank you. We continue, and I apologize to my colleagues for making you come on and off the podium, but it would be difficult to organize otherwise. Diego.
Yes, vous m'entendez?
Absolument.
Thank you so much. So, two short questions to come back to the membership request. Have you received anything from Kiev regarding membership? We received a letter. And the second question is, Eric, you said the Commission has no say in the process, but it's not really true since, 2 years ago, the Commission made a proposal for a new methodology of the accession process. Are you planning anything like this to, because you could propose a fast track that then would be discussed in Council or whatever. Is there anything in the pipeline? Thank you.
Thank you. On your first question, I'm not aware of us having received a formal request, Anna. But as you can imagine, the Ukrainian authorities have an invasion to repel, and therefore I believe that we have certainly heard the calls from President Zelensky, which is, of course, in itself an important statement. But on having received specific requests, I do not know.
Yes, so just to clarify the procedures, applications for membership are not sent to the Commission, they are sent to the Council. And to our knowledge, there has not been a formal request sent by Ukraine. But again, if something arrives, it would be in the Council.
Thank you. On your second question, on the process, you want to say something on that?
Well, on the second question, I think that, again, as Eric made very clear, I don't think it's for us now to preempt possible next steps. I think that this is a discussion first and foremost at the highest political level, so for the European Council, and I don't think that it would be appropriate for us to pre-jump steps that need to be taken. I think that, as Eric and as the President herself mentioned, there's very clear procedures for this in place, and at the end of the day, this is a debate at the highest political level for the Council.
Thank you, Anna. We continue. Thomas.
Thank you. It's on SWIFT. What can and will you do if, as a result of the blocking of SWIFT, alternative channels and systems are used? Can you act against this circumventing? And also, I wonder what kind of form the decision will take, because SWIFT is in essence a private Belgian society, and in the board there are private banks. I understand this is a technical question, but I don't know if you're going to give us a technical briefing, so I try my luck here. Thank you, bye.
Thanks. I believe we already gave a technical briefing on this. I don't know if this specific question was addressed or not, but in any case, when it comes to circumvention of SWIFT, I'll call Ariana, but let me say a couple of things as introduction. The first is that everybody knows that SWIFT is not the only way that you can conduct financial transactions. But the fact is that it is by far the most efficient and quick and secure way of conducting financial transactions. And this is why this is a system which is by far the global dominant interbank messaging system that processes such payments. So banks that are shut out of SWIFT can certainly try to find other ways, fax machines, alternative systems, but they definitely do not have the same speed and low cost and security as SWIFT has. With that, I pass the floor to Ayana.
Thank you, Eric. I'll try to add some information for as much as I can. Indeed, the decision, well, there has been a proposal presented on ensuring that a certain number of banks are removed from SWIFT. We understand that this is being adopted very soon, so the details will be available later. Eventually, of course, you're welcome to touch base once this has actually happened to have technical information as far as we have not provided it already in the past. What I can add in general on EU sanctions is that Council decisions are binding on EU member states. Council regulations are a legal act of general application, and therefore they're binding on any person or entity under EU jurisdictions. It's the member states that are responsible for the implementation of EU sanctions, as well as identifying breaches and imposing penalties. We are, of course, the guardian of the treaties, and therefore we have to ensure the uniform implementation of EU law, and we monitor the enforcement of it by the member states.
Thank you. We continue. Clotilde. Nous t'écoutons.
Est-ce que vous pouvez m'entendre? Ok, super. J'aurais voulu savoir par rapport à ce que vous disiez pour trouver les solutions légales pour bannir RT et Sputnik de l'Europe. Qu'est-ce que c'est votre timeline? Quand est-ce qu'on peut s'attendre à avoir une solution légale? C'est la première question. La deuxième question, ça serait sur le scope. Are we talking, est-ce que c'est plus comme du broadcasting ou alors leur site ou la partie sur les réseaux sociaux?
Merci. Je pense que tu as pu constater que l'Union européenne a fait preuve d'une célérité sans précédent, je crois que c'est le terme qui convient, en ce qui concerne la définition de sanctions possibles, leur adoption et leur mise en œuvre. Et donc tu peux t'attendre à ce que nous allions le plus vite possible en ce qui concerne les mesures à l'encontre de Sputnik et Russia Today, mais simplement il faut que nous nous assurions que les moyens que nous allons mettre en œuvre, les moyens juridiques, soient les plus appropriés. En ce qui concerne l'étendue exacte de cette sanction, je ne sais pas si on a des détails déjà, mais je crois que l'objectif étant de faire en sorte que leur propagande ne puisse plus être diffusée en Europe, nous allons certainement regarder quels sont tous les supports qui contribuent à diffuser leur message. Nous continuons. Raymond.
Yesterday, Josep Borrell, he announced the 500 million defense assistance the EU will deliver to Ukraine. Today, I have seen on Twitter by some Ukrainian media accounts that Slovakia and Bulgaria and Poland will deliver some fighter jets, some Soviet-made fighter jets that Ukrainians can handle. To Ukraine. My question is, can you confirm this? Do you have any knowledge about this? Is this a part of the EU package? And maybe can you give some further details what it will include, and for instance also if it could include also Turkish-made drones. I think the name is Bayraktar drones. Thank you.
Nabila.
Thanks very much. When it comes to fighter jets, Ukrainian needs are dire, and our member states are already doing a lot and can consider the request of jet fighters made by the Minister Kuleba yesterday at the G7 meeting of Foreign Affairs. So this is already to answer your question. As for the latest that you were talking about, I'm not sure I heard about the decision by Lithuania to do it. But under the EPF, we will definitely strengthen the Ukrainian armed force capability to defend their territory and population. And you've heard the HRVP yesterday and the announcement of a package of 500 million under the UPF, 450 being lethal and 50 being non-lethal. The EPF can support, for example, the delivery of arms, ammunition, guns, anti-tanks, air defense, etc. And the EU, through its military staff, will act as a clearinghouse and coordinate with member states the needs of the Ukrainian armed forces.
So, Remo, I think things are evolving very, very quickly. Your questions, your detailed questions, are absolutely legitimate. We will see at how we can progressively provide further detail when it comes to what we will be financing under the European peace facility. So watch this space.
If I may add something, I mean, there is a Foreign Affairs Council Defense taking place as we speak right now. And of course, ministers of defense will assess the situation and speak about this too.
Very true. Thanks for reminding us all of that. David.
Thank you, Eric. David Price, Your Democracy. I wonder if you could give us a little bit more background on the reason why the public's right to have all sorts of information is being curtailed. You mentioned there's an exceptional case because of a war, but during the whole of the Cold War, Soviet and communist propaganda was very strong, much stronger than the media being talked about. And that Western Europe actually grew stronger because it could pick apart propaganda. So I'm wondering if you could give us some reasons exactly why this very fundamental right of the public to have information from all sources is being curtailed. My second question is about the European Union, and before that the European Community is known as a zone of peace, and it ended 2,000 years of war in Western Europe. And I'm wondering why the European Union is now taking sides in a war between what are, as far as I remember, two non-member states, and not taking the role of being an arbiter and a peacemaker between the two states. What is the reason why these two states, which are amongst the most corrupt in Europe, Ukraine is the 122nd most corrupt state in the world, and Russia is not far behind. So could you tell me why European Union is giving up its obvious role as peacemaker?
Thank you for your two questions. The first thing I think I can say is that the right to information to providing information is not absolute. There are always in member states laws and regulations that define this right in order to avoid a certain number of things, like hate speech, for example. The second thing is that we have regulators who look at these things, and Johannes is reminding me that they have in the past already taken measures against these two media outlets. Your point is a very serious one indeed, David, and we do not underestimate the necessity and the paramount importance of maintaining freedom of speech and freedom of information in Europe, beyond a shadow of a doubt. The point that is being made, and that will certainly be argued in whatever legal instrument it is that we propose ultimately, is that we are now in a situation where these two media are actually not complying with the basic principles that pertain to freedom of information and freedom of media. So I invite you to wait until we come forward with our concrete proposal, and then you will see how we argue this in specific terms. When it comes... Tu veux ajouter quelque chose? Je t'en prie.
If I just may add also, David, is that, I mean, there are also serious questions about calling them media. I would remind you that the editor-in-chief, for example, of RT, Margarita Simonian, has said that RT was, and I quote, fighting an information war against the whole Western world. I mean, when you say something like this, I doubt that we can define them as media or independent media.
The general argument we're making, David, is that they are part of the Kremlin's war machine. They are propaganda instruments for Russia, and from that point of view can fall in the scope of the type of sanctions that we are working on. On your second question, I leave to you the entire responsibility of your comments as to Ukraine when it comes to the fight against corruption. And I believe, quite frankly, that it is out of place. You have a country that has been working with the European Union for years now in order to improve the state of its democracy. No democracy is perfect. Democracy is a path. It is not a state. It is something that you work on day by day, and this is precisely why in the European Union as well, we have processes, and that we have discussed here many, many times, in order to defend the rule of law and try to address the issues and improve the state of the rule of law. But there are questions, let's be clear, of life and death. And Ukraine is a country which is under an existential threat. And I think that the overwhelming reaction across Europe, and you have seen it in the public reactions, is one of complete support for Ukraine in view of a completely unjustified and horrendous invasion. And in that context, the European Union is trying to restore peace. Restore peace. It is not us who have decided of the events that are taking place in Ukraine. But we have always said that we stood by the Ukrainian people. This is a country with whom we have signed an association agreement. It is not a neutral country. It is a country with whom we have signed an association agreement. It is a country with which we have been working to integrate our economies. It is a country whose residents come to the European Union visa-free. It is a country whose energy systems we are integrating with ours. And it is a country that aspires to join the European Union, as its president from an embattled city of Kiev reminded us all this morning. And in that context, I think there is an overwhelming feeling that we need to help Ukraine with whatever means we have. And again, we are against war. We believe that the European Union, as you quite rightly pointed out, is the most successful peace project in the history of mankind. But there is a paradigm shift when it comes to the security situation in Europe. It has started in Ukraine, but as you can read everywhere, and as we all acknowledge, it is not limited to Ukraine. And therefore, Europe is acting in defense of Ukraine, in defense of democracy, and in defense of Europe. Sandor.
Thanks, Eric. Yesterday, Prime Minister Orban said that despite the EU sanctions, he would like to go on with his Russian-Hungarian nuclear deal to build PAX-2 reactors. As far as I understand, one of the financing Russian banks, VEB, is under EU sanctions. So my question is, are you looking at this issue, and is there any tools or any opinion whether or not Russia should be able to build a nuclear reactor on EU territory in the coming years? Thank you.
Thank you, Sandor. I'm afraid we're not able to answer that very specific question from the podium now. You see that the gist of our relations with Russia at the moment goes in a completely different direction. But of course, we are dealing with a very, very immediate crisis, the invasion of Ukraine. We certainly hope that we will be able to see an improvement, that the Russian troops will go back to their home bases, that peace negotiations will take place and be successful, and that we can then, on a renewed basis, look at long-term relationships in a different light. But at the moment, it is clear that our focus is on supporting Ukraine to repel the invasion. You want?
And we were, all member states were united on this, actually. This is very important to remind you.
Thank you. Léo.
Bonjour, j'ai une question pour revenir sur le sujet de l'élargissement. Vous avez mentionné que ce n'était pas du ressort de la Commission de commenter les négociations au processus d'adhésion, mais vous avez également mentionné d'autres perspectives pour l'Ukraine. La présidente a également mentionné une intégration au marché intérieur, intégration au réseau d'électricité. J'aurais voulu savoir s'il y avait des propositions qui étaient dans les tuyaux à ce sujet-là pour intégrer l'Ukraine au marché intérieur de manière plus poussée. Quelles sont les propositions pour étendre l'accord d'association, et est-ce que ces propositions vont être discutées dans les prochains conseils des ministres de l'énergie et des ministres des Affaires étrangères?
Nous étions en train de décrire, Léo, un processus qui est en cours et que visiblement tu maîtrises parfaitement. Je n'ai pas ici, depuis le podium, annoncé de nouvelles initiatives dans ce domaine, ce qui n'exclut rien à l'avenir. Simplement, il y a un processus en cours avec les autorités ukrainiennes, par exemple pour, et c'est à ça que faisait référence la présidente hier, synchroniser leur réseau électrique avec le nôtre. Il n'y a pas besoin de nouvelles propositions sur la table. Il y a un travail technique à effectuer afin de pouvoir justement mener à bien cet effort, qui est un effort très compliqué, très complexe et très important, afin de relier le réseau électrique ukrainien avec le nôtre. De même, nous travaillons avec les Ukrainiens sur le renforcement de leur sécurité d'approvisionnement en énergie. Et un des éléments qui a été mis en œuvre ces derniers temps, c'est justement la livraison de gaz à l'Ukraine par les gazoducs qui sont présents en Slovaquie et en Hongrie. Donc c'est à ça que nous faisions référence. Et en ce qui concerne le marché intérieur, il y a toute une série de groupes de travail qui travaillent, si je peux m'exprimer, ainsi avec les autorités ukrainiennes, notamment sur les questions de réglementation technique, etc., afin de s'assurer que les produits de l'Ukraine d'une part et de l'Union européenne puissent circuler librement. Et de même, il y a un travail aussi en cours avec la DigiTrade, je pense, sur tout ce qui est barrières non tarifaires aux échanges de produits entre nos deux zones. Voilà, je vois qu'il y a encore une question. David, I come back to you, but I'm not going to get engaged in the debate. Okay?
Thank you, Eric. This is basically slightly different questions. It's relative to what's called the propaganda war or war machine. The Russians are saying that what is lacking in the West is an understanding of what's been happening over the last 8 years, where 14,000 people have died, and nothing much has been said in Western media. And there's a need to actually have access for the Western European public to have access, or the West to have access to what's going on. Secondarily, I asked a question last week about Russia's war aims, and I was not able to get a reply. But if we have a flow of information, it is the best way to understand how we can resolve the situation, whether it's energy, protection of civilians who are being bombarded, and so on. But if we cut off access to information, we're going to have a much longer drawn-out war than is foreseen, because we're acting out of ignorance. So my plea is that, at least to have an understanding how the decisions are made that seem to be against the public's interest, to cut out sources of information, and secondarily, how can we actually define what Russia is up to? And access to information is not about emotion, about whose side we're on.
Look, let me make one thing extremely clear. This press room is not about you stating points of view repeatedly on the same issue. Okay? You ask a question, we provide an answer. And I will be very strict on this. You can ask follow-up questions as much as you want, but please do not abuse the time of your colleagues and ours to repeat the same positions you have already expressed. Okay? In particular, in this point in time where we are all so extremely busy. Now, on your point